Hi, Jay here again. And I'm dealing with the question concerning Ishmael versus Isaac. A lot of Muslims think that the Prophet Muhammad could come through the Ishmael line, which Muslims believe that Muhammad did come through the Ishmael line, and it's just as authoritative as the line of Isaac, that we basically go back to Abraham. Both Christians, Jews, and Muslims all come back to Abraham, therefore we all have the same root, and we therefore have the same inheritance. Now the difficulty is that there's a number of difficulties. First and foremost, well, certainly, I always ask my Muslim friends, if you believe it's Ishmael, then why is it that all the prophets in your Qur'an, when you look at the Qur'an, I got a small Qur'an here, and almost all the prophets there are in the line of Isaac. In fact, Surah 29, Ayah 27, even stipulates that. It goes specifically and talks about the fact that the line should come to that. And let me just read it to you. And we bestowed on him Ibrahim, Isaac, and Jacob. That's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we ordained among his offspring prophethood in the book. So even the Quran suggests that the lineage must come through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And just look at all your prophets. Ask me, what line do they come in? Moses, Ibrahim. Of course, Ibrahim is the father of that line. But Moses, Dawud, Moses, David, Yahya, John the Baptist, Isa, Jesus, they all come in one line and one line alone, and that's the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So even your Quran suggests that the line is the Isaac line. But I need to go back to my Bible. That's really where you really find it. That's where it's really strong. And it's very clear, because Abraham had the same question in Genesis chapter 17. He says in verse 18, Abraham said to God, verse 18 of chapter 17, if only Ishmael might live under your blessing. In other words, what about my son Ishmael? He's the older. And God said, yes, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and we'll call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him, with Isaac. Verse 20, and as for Ishmael, well, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. And he will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. So God is saying, yes, I will bless Ishmael. But then read the next verse, verse 21. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac. The covenant is uniquely with Isaac. So if you're going to believe that Abraham had two sons and both were equal, no, God was very clear that it was only the Isaac line. And that is very clear when you go to chapter 22, just 2 chapters, 3, 4, 5 chapters later of Genesis. In chapter 22 of Genesis, he says over and over again, not once, verse 2, then God said, take your son, your only son Isaac. Also in verse 13, because you have not, verse 12, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. So he's talking about his only son, Isaac. That's repeated again in verse 16. For you have not withheld your son, your only son. Now hold on a minute. Did God not know he had two sons at this time? Of course he knew he had two sons. This is God. But as far as God was concerned, there was only one son that he was interested in. There's only one son that he had considered to be his unique son, and that was Isaac. Why? Because that was the son that he gave as a miracle. It was he that provided that son. Ishmael was the son that Abraham went in his impatience to try to basically alleviate the problem that he saw there because of the infertility of Sarah. God is big enough to open Sarah's womb, is what he was saying. And therefore he gave that son to Abraham to prove that it was his doing. And therefore the lineage would come from something God had done. As far as God was concerned, there was only one line. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, let's jump to Paul. See, Paul takes us one step further. Galatians, when he's writing to the book of the church in Galatia, he says, hold on a minute. He says, verse 23 of chapter 4 of Galatians, Abraham had two sons. His son by the slave woman was born in the ordinary way, but his son by the free woman was born as the result of promise. So he's talking about Ishmael and Isaac, both sons of Abraham. Now, these things are to be taken figuratively, for the women represent two covenants. One covenant is for Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia. You can't get more specific than that. So therefore, there is one son that came through Hagar who was a slave. Therefore, they are people of slave. Now stop and think. Don't you Muslims say that you are slaves of God? Abdullah, slaves of God. Isn't that how you even define yourself? So it seems like this would fit perfectly with what Paul is saying here in Galatia. But then look and see what he says in verse 28. Now you brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. Those who come from Isaac's line are children of promise. At that time, the son born in the ordinary way, that's Ishmael, persecuted the son born of the power of the Spirit. That's Isaac. It is the same now, 2,000 years ago. But what does the scripture say? Get rid of the slave woman and her son, for the slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with the free woman's son. Therefore, brothers, we are not children of slave, we are not children of Hagar, we are not children as Ishmael came of the slave woman, but we are from the free woman Sarah. There's the whole reference in Galatians of what I think is exactly what we're not to do. We're to have nothing to do with Ishmael. We're to have nothing to do with those who come in that descendants. We're to have nothing to do with, therefore, Muhammad. We'll talk more about Muhammad later. We're to be people of the covenant. We're to be people of Sarah. The line of Isaac that came through Abraham and Sarah. That is the line. That is why all the prophets came in that line. That's why Jesus came in that line. And that is the pure line. We don't need Ishmael. Forget Ishmael. We're to get rid of him, Paul says. We are we are the descendants of the free woman. Oh, it's so good to see how you can apply scripture so adequately and so simply. I'll leave that with you. Come on back. Tell me what you think.